Hey guys, welcome back. Tonight, we're stepping into one of history's most infamous places, a city so notorious that its name became synonymous with destruction itself. Picture this. You're standing on a dusty trade route in the Jordan Valley, circa 1650 BCE, watching massive mud brick walls shimmer in the pre-dawn heat. The air already tastes like copper and sulfur. Behind those walls, tens of thousands of people are waking up to what they think is just another day of Bronze Age business as usual. They're wrong. And here's the thing, you probably won't survive this either. We're talking about Sodom and Gomorrah, the twin cities of wickedness that the ancient world couldn't stop talking about. Whether you believe in divine judgment or catastrophic geological events, one thing's certain. Something utterly devastating happened here, and archaeologists are still digging through the evidence 3,600 years later. The destruction was so complete that the entire region, home to maybe 60,000 people, became virtually uninhabited for 6 centuries. That's not hyperbole. That's the archaeological record. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I'm always curious who's falling asleep to ancient catastrophes at 2 a.m. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You arrive at the city gates just as the sun breaks over the eastern hills, painting the Jordan Valley in shades of amber and rust. The walls tower above you, mud brick fortifications rising 3, maybe 4 stories high, thick enough that 2 chariots could pass each other on top. This is Tal el-Hammam, though you don't know that name yet. To you, to everyone in this era, it's simply the greatest city in the Kikar, the circular plain of the Jordan. Home to at least 50,000 souls, sprawling across 90 acres of prime real estate, with access to fresh water, fertile fields, and every trade route that matters in the ancient Near East. The gates are already open, and that's your first clue that something's different here. In most Bronze Age cities, hospitality is sacred. Travelers are greeted, assessed, often welcomed with the ritualistic offering of bread and salt. Guest right, they call it across Canaan, Mesopotamia, and down into Egypt. A stranger enters your city, they're under your protection. Break that covenant, and you've committed an offense so profound that neighboring cities might refuse to trade with you. But here, the guards barely glance at you. One spits into the dust near your feet, not quite on your sandals, but close enough to make the point. You step through the gateway, and the noise hits you like a physical thing. Bronze Age cities are never quiet, but this is different. There's an edge to it, a tension humming beneath the usual morning commerce. To your left, a potter's wheel spins, throwing clay vessels that will hold olive oil bound for Egyptian markets. To your right, a woman argues with a grain merchant, her voice sharp enough to cut bronze. She's holding a ceramic weight in her palm, the kind used to measure out barley. "This is light," she hisses. "You think I can't tell?" The merchant shrugs, completely unbothered. Historians still argue whether Bronze Age commerce operated on trust or exploitation, but you're getting a pretty clear answer right now. The streets are narrow, barely 8 feet across in places, and the buildings press in on either side, their upper stories jutting out to create corridors of shade. It's a practical design for the brutal Levantine sun, but it also means you can't see more than 20 feet ahead at any given time. The air smells like humanity compressed: wood smoke, animal dung, roasting meat, unwashed bodies, and underneath it all, that persistent mineral tang of sulfur. Natural hot springs dot this region, feeding the Dead Sea 15 miles south. You've read that the area is geologically active, sitting on a transform fault that's been building pressure for centuries. But that's knowledge from a future you don't have access to. Right now, it's just the smell of home to these people. A child darts past you, chasing a goat that's escaped from somewhere, and nearly knocks you into a drainage channel running down the center of the street. Bronze Age urban planning includes rudimentary sewage systems, which is more than you can say for medieval European cities 2,000 years from now. But that doesn't mean you want to fall into one. You steady yourself against a wall, sun-baked mud brick, warm even at this early hour, and notice the texture. Straw mixed into the clay for binding, exactly like the bricks the Israelites will be forced to make in Egypt, though that story is still playing out elsewhere, or maybe hasn't happened yet. Time gets weird when you're standing in the archaeological record. A merchant catches your eye, or rather, you catch his. He's set up a small table near a corner where the street widens into something approximating a square. His goods are modest: bronze needles, ceramic oil lamps, a few amulets carved from bone or stone. Fertility goddesses mostly, the kind archaeologists will catalogue as Canaanite religious artifacts when they dig them up. He gestures you over with a smile that doesn't reach his eyes. Traveller, he says, in a dialect of Northwest Semitic that you can somehow understand, because that's how these journeys work. You look like someone who appreciates quality. His hand hovers over a particularly nice oil lamp, decorated with a zigzag pattern. From the coast, he adds, Phoenician work, very rare. You know enough not to seem too interested. Bronze Age haggling is an art form, and appearing eager is a good way to pay triple the actual value. But before you can respond, another voice cuts in from behind you. He made that lamp himself 3 days ago. You turn. The speaker is younger, maybe 20, with the lean build of someone who works with their hands. A rival merchant? A disgruntled customer? He doesn't elaborate, just meets your eyes for a moment before moving on down the street. The first merchant's smile vanishes. Liar, he mutters, but he's already packing up his wares, the interaction soured beyond repair. Welcome to Sodom, where trust is a currency nobody trades in. You're starting to understand why this place earned its reputation, not because of some abstract wickedness, but because the basic social contracts that make civilization function seem to have broken down completely. In most Bronze Age societies, reputation is everything. Cities are small enough that everyone knows everyone, or knows someone who knows them. Cheat a customer, mistreat a guest, and word spreads. You become unmarriageable, unemployable, socially dead. But here, in this thriving metropolis of tens of thousands, anonymity is possible. And with anonymity comes a kind of freedom that curdles into something uglier. The sun climbs higher, the day is just beginning, and you've already learned the first rule of survival. Trust no one, question everything, and keep your hand on your purse. Because in Sodom, even dawn comes with teeth. The marketplace sprawls across the lower city like a living organism, pulsing with transaction and suspicion in equal measure. You've wandered into the commercial heart of Sodom, where goods from 3 continents change hands beneath awnings of goat hair and linen. Egyptian faience beads catch the morning light next to Mesopotamian cylinder seals, while Cypriot pottery, those distinctive base-ring jugs that archaeologists will instantly recognize, sits stacked beside locally produced storage jars. This is a Bronze Age trade hub at its peak, connected to networks that stretch from the Nile Delta to the Zagros Mountains. Except here, every transaction feels like a negotiation for your life. You're watching an exchange between 2 merchants when you first notice the pattern. A trader from the north, you can tell by his woven wool cloak, dyed with expensive Tyrian purple, is trying to sell bronze ingots, standard commercial goods in this era. Bronze is the steel of the ancient world, the metal that gives this entire age its name. The local buyer examines the ingots with exaggerated skepticism, scratching at the surface with a flint knife to check for lead adulteration. "These are soft," he declares, "low tin content, worth half what you're asking." The northern merchant's face darkens. "These ingots came from Cyprus," he says evenly. 90% copper, 10% tin. Standard proportions. You know this.
The local shrugs. "Prove it."
And there it is, the crux of Bronze Age commerce distilled into 2 words. Without standardized currency, without enforceable contracts, without any authority willing to arbitrate fairly, trade becomes a battle of wills. The northern merchant could, in theory, appeal to the city elders or the king's representatives. Every Bronze Age city has some mechanism for dispute resolution: temple courts, royal arbitrators, councils of prominent citizens. But you're starting to suspect that in Sodom, those mechanisms are decorative at best. The northern merchant packs up his bronze, jaw tight with controlled fury, and moves on. He'll try another city, Gomorrah maybe, just 5 miles north. Or he'll head west toward the coast, where Phoenician traders at least pretend to honor their agreements. You drift toward the food vendors, drawn by the smell of roasting meat, probably lamb, though the smoke makes it hard to tell. A woman tends the fire, turning skewers with practiced efficiency. Her setup is more permanent than the bronze merchants. A proper stall with a stone hearth and ceramic storage vessels for oil and spices. This is someone with connections, with permission to occupy this prime real estate day after day. You approach, and she names a price that makes your eyes water. For comparison, in most Bronze Age cities, a laborer's daily wage might buy a large loaf of bread and a small portion of meat. What she's quoting would feed a family for 3 days in Jericho or Hatzor. "That's robbery," you say before you can stop yourself. She smiles, but it's all edges. "That's commerce. Don't like it? There's another vendor down by the temple district." She gestures vaguely south. "I hear his meat is very affordable. Of course, I also hear he doesn't check his suppliers too carefully. Might be mutton, might be dog, who can say?" It's a threat disguised as consumer advice, and it's effective. You pay her price, accepting a skewer of what's probably lamb, but could legitimately be anything. It tastes like smoke and cumin and strategic ambiguity. Welcome to eating out in Sodom, where food safety standards won't be invented for another 3,600 years. As you eat, you observe the broader pattern. Every transaction you witness involves some element of deception, coercion, or exploitation. A potter sells cracked vessels with the damaged side facing away from customers. A textile merchant claims his linen is Egyptian when it's clearly local production. You can tell by the weave, looser than the impossibly fine linen that comes up from Memphis. A livestock trader has a pen of goats that look healthy, until you notice they're all slightly lame in the left foreleg. Some disease, probably, that will manifest fully in a week or 2. By then, the buyers will be back in their home villages, and good luck tracking down a merchant in a city of 50,000 when you don't even know his name. Here's the quirky historical bit that archaeologists love. Bronze Age merchants sometimes used a system called sealed trade, where goods were wrapped in clay envelopes stamped with the seller's seal. Break the seal, inspect the goods. If everything's as promised, great. If not, you have evidence of fraud. That unique seal impression proving who sold you garbage. It's a primitive but effective form of consumer protection. You don't see a single sealed transaction in this marketplace. Not one. Every sale is immediate, hand to hand, with no accountability trail whatsoever. That absence is itself evidence of something profoundly wrong in the social fabric here. You're beginning to understand why the biblical account focuses so heavily on Sodom's treatment of strangers and guests. It's not just about hospitality as an abstract virtue. In Bronze Age society, the treatment of travelers is the canary in the coal mine for overall social health. Travelers are vulnerable. They're outside their kinship networks, their protective web of family and tribal obligation. How a society treats its most vulnerable members reveals its actual values, stripped of the comfortable fiction that everyone's part of the same community. And by that measure, Sodom is failing spectacularly.
A commotion erupts near the pottery stalls. A foreign merchant, Aramaean based on his distinctive beard style, is shouting about being robbed. A crowd gathers, but not to help. They're watching with the detached interest of people observing entertainment. The merchant appeals to the crowd, demanding justice, asking if anyone saw the theft. Someone laughs. Another person suggests maybe the merchant just lost his goods. Easy mistake. The merchant's face cycles through disbelief, rage, and finally resignation. He shoulders his nearly empty pack and heads for the gates. You watch him go and you realize this is intentional. This city doesn't just tolerate predation, it encourages it. Strangers are prey. Fairness is weakness. And anyone who expects otherwise is a mark waiting to be exploited. The sun has reached its zenith now, and the heat is becoming genuinely dangerous, the kind that kills travelers who don't respect it. You need shade, water, and a plan, because you're starting to grasp the terrible mathematics of survival here. Every moment you remain a stranger in Sodom, you're a target. The city is rich, powerful, and thoroughly corrupted by its own success. And that combination, historically speaking, has never ended well. You follow the upward slope of the city, away from the commercial chaos of the lower marketplace, toward what must be the palace district.
Bronze Age cities are nothing if not predictable in their geography. Poor people and trade near the gates where taxes get collected. Wealthy people and power up on the high ground, where they can literally look down on everyone else. The streets narrow further as you climb, the buildings becoming more elaborate. These aren't the cramped mud brick structures of the lower city. These are proper houses, 2, even 3 stories tall, with plastered walls and what look like painted frescoes visible through doorways. In one courtyard, you glimpse date palms and what might be a small fountain, an extravagant waste of water that announces wealth more effectively than any bronze ornament. The palace itself dominates the highest point of the city, a sprawling complex of buildings organized around a central courtyard. The architecture is distinctly Canaanite. Mud brick walls with timber reinforcement, flat roofs designed to catch rainwater, and a monumental gateway decorated with guardian figures. Not the winged bulls of later Assyrian palaces, but something older, more abstracted. Stone reliefs depicting lions, maybe, or bulls. It's hard to tell from this distance, and you're definitely not getting closer. Guards flank the entrance, and unlike the bored gate guards who let you into the city at dawn, these men are alert, professional, and armed with bronze-tipped spears that have seen actual use. The points are nicked and discolored in the way that only comes from being thrust into living flesh.
But you don't need to enter the palace to understand the power structure here.
You can read it in the streets, in the architecture, in the way people move and speak, and carefully don't make eye contact with certain houses. Bronze Age society is rigidly stratified. Everyone knows their place, and transgressing those boundaries is dangerous. At the top, the king and his immediate family, probably claiming some form of divine mandate. Just below, the priestly class, who control access to the gods and thus control the moral justification for everything the king does. Then come the palace bureaucrats, the military officers, the wealthy merchant families who've successfully converted commerce into political influence. Below them, the artisans and skilled workers. Below them, the free peasants who farm the surrounding fields. And at the bottom, the slaves, debt slaves, war captives, people born into bondage. It's a pyramid, and like all pyramids, It requires a lot of people at the base, supporting a very few people at the top. What makes Sodom different, what makes it notorious, is how that stratification has been weaponized. In most Bronze Age cities, the social hierarchy comes with at least a theoretical set of obligations. The king is supposed to ensure justice. The wealthy are supposed to provide patronage. The powerful are supposed to protect the weak. It's not altruism, it's enlightened self-interest. Keep the peasants fed and relatively content, and they'll keep farming your fields and fighting your wars. But here, those obligations seem to have evaporated. The hierarchy remains, the structure of power, but the responsibilities that justified it are gone. What's left is predation dressed in the robes of authority. You witness an example as a man is dragged into the street by two guards. He's not fighting, which suggests this isn't an arrest so much as a foregone conclusion. A small crowd gathers, not the curious mass from the marketplace earlier, but a more select audience. A city official emerges from a nearby house, an older man with the elaborate beard and copper jewelry that mark him as someone important. The accused man tries to speak, but one of the guards casually strikes him across the face. The official doesn't even watch this violence. He's examining a clay tablet, squinting at the cuneiform impressions. "The debt stands," he announces. 40 shekels of silver. You have 30 days to pay, or you and your family enter bond service. 40 shekels. For context, that's roughly 3 years' wages for a skilled worker. The accused man begins to weep, and you understand. This is how you create slaves in Bronze Age society. You trap people in debt, through extortionate interest rates, through rigged transactions, through accusations they can't contest, and then you offer them a choice. Lose your freedom or watch your children starve. It's legal. It's been legal for centuries across the ancient Near East. But most societies at least pretend there are limits, that debt slavery is a last resort, that it comes with protections and time limits. Here, it's clearly just another business model. The official notices you watching. His eyes linger for a moment, calculating. You're dressed as a traveller, which means you might have goods. You're alone, which means you're vulnerable. You're foreign, which means you have no kinship network to retaliate if something happens to you. He nods slightly, almost to himself, and you feel your spine turn to ice. You've just been assessed and categorized. Your inventory now, a potential asset, a problem to be solved, or an opportunity to be exploited. You move away quickly, trying to look purposeful, trying to blend into the sparse crowd of the upper city. Here's what historians still argue about. Whether the wickedness of Sodom and Gomorrah was primarily sexual, the traditional interpretation focusing on homosexuality, primarily social, the interpretation emphasizing injustice and inhospitality, or some combination thereof. The biblical text itself is somewhat ambiguous, offering different indictments in different books. Genesis focuses on the violence toward guests. Ezekiel says the sin was arrogance, complacency, and failure to help the poor. Isaiah uses Sodom as shorthand for corrupt rulers who ignore justice. What's becoming clear to you, standing in these streets, is that the wickedness isn't any single act. It's systemic. It's the complete breakdown of the social contract that makes civilization viable. It's the transformation of community into a hunting ground. You pass a temple, probably dedicated to El or Baal, or one of the local manifestations of the fertility goddess. The entrance is impressive, flanked by standing stones and an altar stained dark with old blood. Animal sacrifice is standard Bronze Age religious practice, as common as prayer. But you notice the worshippers entering and leaving, and there's something perfunctory about it, going through the motions. Religion here has become a transaction like any other. Offer this, receive that, move on. The idea that the gods might demand justice or compassion seems as foreign as your accent. The afternoon heat is peaking now, the kind of temperature that makes the air shimmer and stone too hot to touch. You need to find shelter, but you're increasingly aware that accepting hospitality in this city might be more dangerous than staying in the streets. The Palace District offers no refuge. The lower city offers no safety. And somewhere, though you don't know it yet, the clock is ticking down towards sunset, when two travelers will arrive at the city gates and set in motion the final catastrophe. But that's still hours away. For now, you're just trying to survive lunch in the most dangerous city in the ancient world. You find yourself in what passes for a public square, a widening in the streets where several thoroughfares intersect near the city's central well. Water is life in the Jordan Valley, and the well is deep. You can hear the echo when someone drops the bucket, that long moment of silence before the distant splash. Women are drawing water, a daily ritual that cuts across all social classes. Even wealthy households need water, though they'll send servants for it rather than coming themselves. The well is communal space, neutral territory where the normal hierarchies are temporarily suspended. Or at least, that's how it's supposed to work. You watch an elderly woman struggle with the rope, her arms trembling with effort. The clay jar is large, probably holds 2 or 3 gallons, and once filled, it'll weigh 40 pounds or more. In most cities, someone would help. Here, people step around her like she's a stone in the path. A younger woman finally approaches, but before she can assist, another voice cuts across the square. "That's my spot!" The speaker is younger still, maybe 16, with the confident posture of someone who's never been told no. The helpful woman backs away immediately. No argument, no protest. The girl with the confident voice doesn't even help the elderly woman. She just claims the well space and begins drawing her own water, while the old woman waits, still trembling. This is the moment you understand the true perversity of what's happened in Sodom. It's not that hospitality customs don't exist. The knowledge is still there, the inherited cultural memory of how people are supposed to treat each other. It's that those customs have been inverted, weaponized, turned into tools of domination. The sacred duty to welcome strangers has become an opportunity to exploit them. The obligation to share bread and salt, the most basic gesture of peaceful intent across the ancient Near East, has been corrupted into a trap. Let me explain the bread and salt thing, because it's important. In Bronze Age culture, from Mesopotamia to Egypt to the Hittite lands, when you offer someone bread and salt, you're creating a covenant. It's binding. You're saying, "While you eat my food, you are my family. I will protect you as I would protect my own blood. Any harm that comes to you dishonors my house." It's so fundamental that even enemies will honor it. You can find ancient texts where warring kings negotiate under bread and salt truce. And those truces hold because violating them would make you untouchable, unmarriageable, economically dead. Your own people would exile you rather than share in the curse. But covenants only work when everyone agrees they're sacred. When everyone agrees that some things are more important than immediate advantage. And in Sodom, that agreement has shattered. You've been in the city for maybe 8 hours now, and you haven't seen a single genuine act of hospitality. Not one. Oh, you've seen transactions that superficially resemble hospitality. The food vendor selling you meat, the merchant offering goods, but every single one was extraction disguised as exchange. Nobody has offered you anything without expecting more in return. Nobody has helped anyone without calculating the angle. A merchant passing through the square catches your attention. He's setting up what looks like a temporary court, spreading a cloth on the ground and arranging a few goods, bronze tools mostly, and some carved wooden items. But he's also unpacking something else. Bread. Flatbread, fresh enough that steam rises from it in the afternoon heat. And a small ceramic vessel that probably contains salt. Your stomach clenches. He's going to invoke hospitality customs here, in this city where such things mean nothing.
You want to warn him, but you don't know how. You don't even know what the danger is exactly. Just that offering sacred hospitality in this place feels like painting a target on your back. Sure enough, a group of locals approaches. 3 men, well dressed enough to mark them as successful merchants or minor officials. They eye the bread. "Traveller," one of them says warmly, "you've come far. Please, share your bread with us. We'll share information in return, where to find the best lodging, who pays fair prices for goods." It sounds reasonable. It sounds exactly like how hospitality is supposed to function. Exchange of food for exchange of knowledge, the basic social glue that makes long-distance trade possible. The travelling merchant smiles, breaks the bread, sprinkles it with salt from his vessel, and offers portions to the 3 locals. They take it, they eat it, and then, while you watch in horrified fascination, they attack him. It's not violent in the way you'd expect. No knives, no obvious weapons. They simply start taking his goods. When he protests, one of them says loudly, "This man accused me of theft. These are my goods he's stolen." It's an absurd claim. You watch the travelling merchant unpack everything himself. But suddenly, the dynamics shift. Other locals are gathering, and they're not questioning the accusation. They're joining in. Within minutes, the travelling merchant's entire inventory is being claimed by various people, each insisting some item is actually theirs, was stolen from them, is being righteously recovered. The merchant appeals to the crowd, to anyone with authority, to basic fairness. Nobody intervenes. The bread and salt he shared, the covenant he invoked, might as well be dust. He runs. Smart man. He abandons what's left of his goods and runs for the city gates. You don't follow, but you can guess what happens next. He'll make it out. They're not trying to kill him, just rob him. And he'll never return. He'll tell the story in every city between here and Damascus, and one more trader will cross Sodom off his route. But there are always more traders, always more strangers who haven't heard the warnings or don't believe them. The city can sustain itself on a steady stream of victims because the regional trade networks are large enough to absorb the losses. For now, here's the historical quirk. Archaeologists have found evidence that some Bronze Age cities actually did practice forms of sacred theft or redistributive violence, where foreigners could be systematically dispossessed under various legal pretexts. It wasn't universal and it wasn't celebrated, but it happened in places where central authority was weak or where economic desperation was high. The difference is that most cities eventually stabilized. Either the practice died out, or the city itself collapsed from lack of trade. Sodom seems to have found a sweet spot in the Jordan Valley, where it could prey on travelers while remaining geographically indispensable, at least for a while. The sun is beginning its descent toward the western hills. The heat is still oppressive, but there's a quality to the light now, a golden thickness that means evening is coming. You need to decide. Try to find shelter within the city walls, or leave now and take your chances with the desert night. Neither option feels safe. Staying means navigating a society that views you as prey. Leaving means traveling in darkness through terrain where bandits, wildlife, and simple dehydration are all lethal threats. You're paralyzed by the choice when you notice something strange. People are moving toward the city gates. Not in panic, not in exodus, but with purpose. Something or someone is arriving. And from the way the crowd is coalescing, hungry and expectant, you know with sick certainty that whatever's coming through those gates, it's about to become entertainment for a city that's forgotten what compassion looks like. The 2 strangers enter Sodom just as the sun touches the western hills, painting the sky in shades of copper and blood. They're dressed simply, travelers' robes, sturdy sandals, walking staves that have seen real use. Nothing about them announces wealth or importance. In fact, they look vulnerable, which in Sodom is the most dangerous thing you can possibly look. They move through the gates with the easy confidence of men who don't yet understand where they are, and you feel your chest tighten with second-hand dread. They're about to learn. But then something unexpected happens. A man rises from where he's been sitting near the gate. You hadn't noticed him before, which was probably intentional on his part. He's older, maybe 50, with the weathered face of someone who's lived in this climate his whole life. His clothes mark him as prosperous, but not ostentatious. Clean linen robe, sandals with bronze buckles, a single copper ring. He approaches the two strangers and bows. Actually bows. It's such an alien gesture in this city that you almost don't recognize it. "My lords," he says, and his voice carries an urgency that contradicts the formal politeness of the words. "Please, turn aside to your servant's house. Wash your feet and spend the night. And then you can rise early and go on your way." The strangers demur, as custom requires. "No," one of them says, "we'll spend the night in the square." It's a test, the ritual back and forth of hospitality negotiation. The proper response is to insist, to keep offering until the travelers accept. What's not proper is the desperation with which the older man insists. "Please, my lords, I urge you, come to my house." He's almost pleading, and you suddenly understand. He knows what will happen if these strangers spend the night in the square. He's seen it before. This is Lot, nephew of Abraham, resident alien in Sodom, and he's trying to save 2 lives before the city even realizes they're worth taking. The strangers finally agree, and Lot leads them away from the gate quickly, before the gathering crowd can fully coalesce. You follow at a distance, part of the drift of people who've noticed something interesting happening, but haven't yet decided whether it's worth pursuing. Lot's house is in a better neighborhood, not the palace district, but solid middle class. 2 stories, a courtyard visible through the entrance, the kind of establishment that speaks to success without quite achieving wealth. He hustles the strangers inside, and the door closes firmly behind them. Here's what you need to understand about Lot's position. He's a foreigner who's been permitted to live in Sodom, probably because he's useful. He has connections to Abraham, who's becoming a significant power in the region, and he's wealthy enough to pay whatever taxes or bribes are required. But permitted to live here doesn't mean accepted as one of us. He's perpetually on probation, his status contingent on not causing problems for the locals. And taking in strangers, offering them protection, invoking the sacred customs of hospitality that Sodom has explicitly abandoned, that's definitely causing problems. The crowd that was beginning to form at the gate has followed. Not everyone, but enough. Maybe 20 men initially, though the number is growing as word spreads through the evening streets that something interesting is happening at Lot's house. You recognize some of them from the marketplace, from the square, from the various scenes of casual cruelty you've witnessed throughout the day. They're not a mob yet, that comes later, but they're the seed of one. Men who've smelled blood in the water and are gathering to feed. You position yourself across the narrow street, trying to look like just another curious onlooker. The sun has set fully now, and the streetscape is lit by oil lamps and cook fires, throwing dancing shadows against the mud brick walls. Someone pounds on Lot's door, not knocking, pounding. The sound echoes in the twilight like a war drum. You hear Lot's voice from inside, muffled but audible. "Please, my brothers, don't do this wicked thing." Brothers. He's still using kinship language, still pretending that social bonds mean something here. The crowd finds this hilarious. Laughter ripples through the gathered men, and someone shouts back, "Where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us so we can know them." The Hebrew verb to know, yada, can mean simple acquaintance, but in this context, everyone understands the sexual connotation.
This is the moment the traditional interpretation focuses on. The demand for homosexual rape that gives Sodom its enduring association with sexual sin. But here's what historians still debate. Is the sin the homosexuality itself, or the violence? Is it the sex, or the violation of hospitality? Because in the ancient Near Eastern context, when you rape someone's guests, you're not primarily making a statement about sexuality. You're making a statement about power. You're saying, your protection means nothing. Your household means nothing. Your God means nothing. We take what we want, and there's nothing you can do about it. It's dominance expressed through sexual violence, a message that's been used by militaries and militias throughout history. Historians argue whether the biblical authors would have even distinguished between homosexual rape and violation of sacred hospitality as expressed through rape. In their worldview, these might have been the same sin, different facets of the same fundamental transgression.
Lot does something that seems insane to modern sensibilities. He offers his daughters instead. 2 virgin daughters, he announces through the door. Take them instead of the strangers. It's horrifying. It's also, in the Bronze Age context, a desperate attempt to satisfy the crowd's demand for dominance while protecting his guests. The daughters are part of his household. The guests are under divine protection through the hospitality covenant. In Lot's moral calculus, shaped by his culture and his terror, he's trying to minimize the blasphemy. He's wrong, obviously. Offering your daughters to a rape mob is monstrous, regardless of the era. But he's wrong in a way that's historically consistent. This is what happens to moral reasoning when it's trapped between impossible choices in a society that's abandoned justice. The crowd rejects the offer with contempt. "Get out of our way," someone shouts. "This fellow came here as a foreigner, and now he wants to play judge. We'll treat you worse than them." They surge toward the door, and you see the danger crystallize into violence. This is the moment. This is where the city's accumulated wickedness reaches critical mass, where the violation of hospitality customs becomes the violation of cosmic order. They're going to break down the door. They're going to drag out the strangers, drag out Lot, drag out the daughters. They're going to demonstrate that nothing is sacred, that power is the only law, that compassion is just weakness waiting to be exploited. And then the door opens. The 2 strangers step into the doorway, and you're close enough to see their faces. They're calm. That's the first thing you notice. They're not afraid. The crowd hesitates for just a moment, confused by the lack of fear. And in that moment, the strangers make a gesture you can't quite see. They reach out toward the pressing mob, and suddenly men are staggering backward, hands over their faces, crying out in pain and confusion. "I can't see," someone shouts. "My eyes," another screams. Within seconds, the entire crowd is in chaos. Blind men stumbling over each other, panic replacing predation. The strangers pull Lot back inside, and the door slams shut. You're left standing in the street with maybe 40 blind men, some weeping, some angry, all disoriented. Gradually they disperse, led away by friends or family, still rubbing at their eyes. You heard the biblical account mention this. The angels struck the mob with blindness. But you always imagine something more permanent, dramatic. This seems almost clinical, a precise surgical response that neutralized the threat without killing anyone. Yet, the street empties as the blind are led away, and you're left standing in the lamplit darkness, your heart hammering. Inside that house, Lot and his family are having a conversation with 2 beings who just altered reality with a gesture. Outside, a city full of people is going to bed angry, frustrated, confused about what happened, but certain of one thing. Those strangers need to die, and so does anyone who protects them. You don't know it yet, but you have maybe 8 hours before the geological, or divine, depending on your perspective, hammer falls.
8 hours before this entire city and everyone in it becomes a cautionary tale that will echo through millennia. The night deepens. Somewhere, Lot is arguing with his sons-in-law, begging them to leave the city. They think he's joking. Why would they believe him? The city's been here for centuries. It's powerful, wealthy, connected to every trade route that matters. Cities don't just vanish. Except sometimes they do. And when they do, archaeologists spend thousands of years digging through the ash, trying to understand what happened. The city doesn't sleep, but it quiets. The oil lamps burn lower, the street traffic thins to occasional late-night movement. Someone visiting a lover, someone stumbling home from too much beer, someone with business better conducted in darkness. You find a relatively sheltered doorway in the lower city, away from Lot's neighborhood, but with a sightline to the upper districts. You're not sleeping tonight. Something is building. A pressure you can feel in your chest, in the air, in the unnatural stillness between bursts of activity. Around midnight, the pressure breaks. You hear shouting from the direction of Lot's house, not the organized hostility of the earlier crowd, but something wilder, more desperate. Voices overlapping, commands and questions and accusations all bleeding together. You move through the dark streets toward the sound, staying in shadows, and you're not alone. Other people are emerging from their houses, drawn by the commotion or by some instinct that something significant is happening. By the time you get within sight of Lot's house, there are maybe 100 people in the street, and more arriving every minute. The door to Lot's house is open. That's wrong immediately. No one leaves their door open at night, especially not after the confrontation earlier. But it's not just open, it's hanging slightly off its hinges, as if someone forced it outward with desperate strength. Light spills from inside, too much light, like every lamp in the house is burning at once. And in the doorway, Lot stands with his wife and 2 daughters, arguing with the 2 strangers who are no longer pretending to be ordinary travelers. You can't hear the words clearly over the crowd noise, but you can read the body language. The strangers are urgent, pulling at Lut's arm, pointing toward the city gates. Lut keeps looking back into his house, at his possessions probably, the accumulated wealth of decades. His wife is frozen, her face a mask of shock. The daughters are crying, and the strangers finally physically drag them out of the house and into the street. No gentleness now, no polite hospitality customs. This is emergency evacuation, and the strangers, the angels, because that's obviously what they are, don't have time for human hesitation. The crowd parts to let them through, not out of respect, but out of confusion. What's happening? Why is Lot being forced from his own house? Someone tries to ask, and one of the strangers turns a gaze on him that makes the questioner stumble backward, silent. The small group moves toward the gates, the angels half carrying Lot's family, and the crowd follows at a distance, a confused mass of people who sense something huge happening but can't quite grasp it. You follow because what else are you going to do? You've been granted some kind of observer status in this timeline, and whatever's about to happen, you're going to witness it. The gates are still open. They stay open all night in summer because of the heat, only closing for siege or storm. And the angels push Lot's family through them and into the pre-dawn darkness beyond the walls. You hear one of the angels speak, and his voice carries despite the crowd noise, clear as bronze striking stone. Flee for your lives! Don't look back, and don't stop anywhere in the plain. Flee to the mountains, or you will be swept away. Here's what the archaeological record will show 3,600 years from now. Multiple sites in the Jordan Valley were destroyed simultaneously in the Middle Bronze Age, around 1650 BCE. The destruction was catastrophic. Buildings collapsed, pottery melted. Human remains show signs of extreme trauma. The heat was intense enough to turn mud brick into something resembling pottery, to create a layer of ash and debris that shows up in every excavation of the region. After the destruction, the entire area, the Kikar, the circular plain, the most fertile and populous region of ancient Canaan, was essentially abandoned for 6 centuries. Population dropped from tens of thousands to a few hundred nomads. It's called the Late Bronze Age Gap, and historians still argue about what caused it. Was it earthquake? The Jordan Valley sits on the Dead Sea Transform Fault, one of the most geologically active regions on Earth. Earthquakes here can be catastrophic, and they can trigger secondary effects, landslides, fires, even explosions if underground gas pockets are released. Was it asteroid impact? There's some evidence of an airburst event, similar to the Tunguska explosion of 1908, where a meteor exploded in the atmosphere with enough force to devastate the region below. Was it divine judgment? If you believe the biblical account literally, God rained fire and brimstone, sulfur, on the cities, and the geological record actually supports massive sulfur deposits being explosively released. You're about to find out which theory is correct. Or maybe you're about to find out that all the theories are partially right, that catastrophic geological events and divine intervention aren't mutually exclusive categories. The sky continues to lighten. The city behind you settles into pre-dawn quiet. And somewhere in the earth below, or the sky above, or the gap between the physical and metaphysical, the hammer is starting to fall. Lot's family stumbles into the dark, moving east toward the hills. The crowd at the gates watches them go, still confused, still trying to understand. Someone laughs nervously. Someone else suggests going after them, dragging them back. But no one moves. The angels stand in the gateway, facing back toward the city, and their presence, the sheer weight of it, keeps the crowd frozen. You're maybe 20 feet away, close enough to see their faces in the lamplight from the gate towers. They don't look angry, they look sad. That's somehow worse. And then they're gone. Not walking away gone, just gone. One moment they're standing in the gate, the next the space is empty. The crowd surges forward, filling the emptiness, arguing about what they just saw, what it means, whether Lot will come crawling back by morning. Someone suggests looting his house. Someone else suggests maybe they should all leave, just in case. That suggestion gets shouted down. Leave the greatest city in the Kikar because one crazy foreigner had a panic attack. Ridiculous. But you notice something. Some people are leaving. Not many, maybe a dozen, but they're quietly gathering their families and heading for the gates. They're the ones who've seen enough Bronze Age omens to know when the gods are sending a message. They're probably believers in the old stories, the ones where divine beings walk among humans and cities get judged for their sins. Everyone else dismisses them as superstitious cowards, but you notice the dismissals sound a little forced, a little desperate. The sky is beginning to lighten in the east, not dawn yet, but that pre-dawn glow when the stars fade and the world holds its breath between darkness and light. You're standing in the gateway, looking out at the plain beyond the walls. Lot's family is out there somewhere, running or stumbling toward the hills. Inside the city behind you, tens of thousands of people are settling back into their beds, convinced they've seen the last of the drama. Maybe a few are feeling uneasy, vaguely troubled by the night's events. But most are just annoyed at having their sleep disturbed. The first sign is sound. A low rumble that you feel in your bones before you hear it with your ears. It's the kind of sound that doesn't have a direction. It comes from everywhere at once, from the earth itself. People in the streets stop mid-conversation. Dogs start barking. The few remaining livestock in the city pens, goats, sheep, a handful of donkeys, go silent in that way animals do when they sense danger beyond human perception. Then the shaking starts. It's not dramatic at first. The ground shivers, a sensation like standing on a wagon rolling over cobblestones. But it builds quickly, intensifying from tremor to quake in the span of a few heartbeats. You grab onto a doorframe as the street begins to heave, and you watch in horrified fascination as the mud brick buildings, these structures that have stood for decades, maybe centuries, start to crack. Vertical fissures appear in walls, spreading like lightning in reverse. A rooftop collapses into the building below with a sound like thunder. Somewhere close, someone screams. The shaking peaks, a full-body convulsion of the earth that throws you to the ground. You can't stand. The street is bucking like a living thing, and the sound is indescribable. The grinding of stone, the snapping of timber, the crash of collapsing buildings, and underneath it all, that bone-deep rumble that seems to come from the core of the world. This is what a major earthquake feels like in the Bronze Age, where every structure is unreinforced mud and stone, where there are no building codes or seismic safety standards, where cities are death traps waiting for the ground to move. But this is worse than a normal earthquake. As the shaking continues, 10 seconds, 20, an eternity of motion, the sky begins to change. You look up from where you're sprawled in the street, and the pre-dawn light is turning orange, then red, then a sick yellow-green. Smoke is rising from somewhere, multiple somewheres, but it's not normal smoke from cook fires or even building fires. It's thick, oily, wrong-coloured, and it smells like hell.
Sulphur. The air reeks of sulphur. That rotten egg stench multiplied 1,000-fold. So strong it burns your throat and makes your eyes water. You're breathing poison, you realise dimly. The earthquake has ruptured something underground, released gases that have been trapped in the Earth's crust for millennia. Natural gas, hydrogen sulfide, sulfur dioxide. The Jordan Valley is riddled with deposits of these things, the geological legacy of the Dead Sea's chemical soup. And now they're venting into the atmosphere, mixing with the dust from collapsed buildings, creating a toxic fog that's rolling through the streets like a living thing. People are running now, the ones who can still move. Running for the gates, running for open ground, running in blind panic because the world has become incomprehensible. You try to follow, but the shaking is still too intense, and the smoke is so thick you can barely see 10 feet. You crawl instead, hands and knees on stone that's still trembling, following the sound of other people fleeing. Someone stumbles over you, kicks you accidentally, keeps running without looking back. Survival has become entirely individual. There's no community left, no social bonds, just raw animal terror. And then the fire starts. It begins in the Palace District. You can tell by the direction of the light, a sudden bloom of orange-red against the sick green sky. But it spreads impossibly fast, faster than normal fire should spread, jumping from building to building with no regard for wind direction or available fuel. This isn't a normal fire. This is combustion on a different scale, as if the air itself is burning, which, given the concentration of natural gas now venting from the ground, might actually be close to the truth. Methane and hydrogen sulfide are both flammable. Get enough of them in the air, add a spark from a collapsed cook fire or oil lamp, and you get an inferno that makes Greek fire look like a candle.
The biblical account says God rained fire and brimstone, burning sulfur from the sky.
The archaeological evidence shows signs of intense heat, melted materials, and massive sulfur deposits. What you're experiencing is probably some combination: earthquake-triggering gas release, gas igniting into a firestorm, possibly combined with an explosive event as underground pressures found release. It doesn't matter whether you call it natural disaster or divine judgment at this point. The effect is the same. Sodom is burning. You make it to the city gates through a combination of luck and persistence. The gates themselves are blocked by fallen stone and panicked people.
But there's a breach in the wall where the shaking brought down a section of fortification. You squeeze through, cutting your arms on sharp stone, not caring, just needing to get out. Beyond the walls, the plain is chaos. People running in all directions, some toward the hills where Lot fled, some toward Gomorrah thinking they'll find safety there, not knowing that Gomorrah is probably experiencing the same catastrophe right now. You run east toward the hills, because that's where the angels told Lot to go, and they seem to know what was coming. Behind you, Sodom is a pillar of fire and smoke, the flames so hot they're white-blue at the base. You can feel the heat on your back from hundreds of yards away. The sun is rising now, proper dawn, and the new light reveals the full scope of the disaster. The entire plain is burning. Not just Sodom, Gomorrah to the north, Admah and Zeboim to the south. All the cities of the plain are sending up smoke columns that merge into a single black cloud stretching across the sky. You're running uphill now, your lungs burning from the poisoned air, your legs trembling with exhaustion and terror. You pass other refugees, people from the city, people from the smaller towns, all fleeing toward high ground. Someone is crying about their family left behind. Someone else is simply screaming, a wordless sound of absolute loss. You don't stop to help. You can't. The air is still thick with sulfur, and if you don't get to clean air soon, you'll collapse and die here on the hillside. Near the top of the first ridge, you risk a look back. It's a mistake. The sight of Sodom, that great city, that powerful hub of Bronze Age trade and corruption, reduced to burning wreckage, is so overwhelming that you stumble and nearly fall. The mud brick walls are glowing, literally glowing with heat. Fires are visible through where buildings used to be. And the smoke. The smoke is a column reaching to heaven, black and oily, and so massive it's creating its own weather, lightning flickering in the dark clouds. The biblical text says Lot's wife looked back and became a pillar of salt. You always thought that was metaphorical, maybe a poetic way of describing someone paralyzed by grief or loss. But standing here, seeing what you're seeing, you understand it differently. Look back at this, really look, really take in the full horror of your world ending, and something in you will crystallize, will harden into something that's no longer quite human. Lot's wife looked back and couldn't move forward. Whether she literally became salt or just became a memorial to those who can't let go, even when survival demands it, the meaning is the same. Don't look back. Don't let the past petrify you. Run. You turn away and keep climbing. The air gets cleaner as you gain elevation, the sulfur smell fading to something merely terrible instead of immediately lethal. Your legs are shaking, your vision is tunneling, but you keep moving because stopping means dying. Around you, other survivors are doing the same, a ragged column of humanity climbing towards safety and away from the plain that's becoming a dead zone before your eyes. How many made it out? A few thousand at most, out of a population that probably numbered 60,000 across all the cities. The survival rate is catastrophic. You reach a flat area near the top of the ridge and finally stop. You collapse onto bare rock, gasping, and let yourself rest. Behind and below, the Jordan Valley is a sea of fire and smoke. Ahead, the Judean highlands stretch away toward Jerusalem, toward Hebron, toward lands that will still be there tomorrow. You survived. Against all odds, despite every danger, you survived a day in Sodom and Gomorrah. Most people didn't. Dawn fully breaks over the smoking plain, and the morning light reveals what the darkness mercifully concealed. From your vantage point on the ridge, you can see the entire Jordan Valley spread out below like a map, and it's been transformed into a vision of desolation. Where Sodom stood yesterday, that thriving city of tens of thousands, that hub of trade and power and calculated cruelty,
There's now only smoke and rubble. The fires have burned themselves out mostly, leaving behind a wasteland of collapsed mud brick walls, shattered pottery, and human remains that you're grateful you can't see clearly from this distance. But it's not just Sodom. Gomorrah, 5 miles north, is the same, a smoking ruin. Admah and Zeboim, the smaller cities you only heard about but never visited, are gone too. The entire civilization of the Kikar, this fertile circular plain that was home to Bronze Age Canaan's greatest population center, has been effectively erased. The catastrophe was so complete, so devastating, that it created a wound in the regional population that won't heal for 6 centuries. Archaeologists will call it the Late Bronze Age Gap, a period when this area, previously one of the most densely populated regions in the ancient Near East, supported only a few hundred nomadic people. Around you on the ridge, the survivors are beginning to assess their situation, and it's grim. Most fled with nothing but the clothes they're wearing. They've lost homes, possessions, family members, everything. Some are catatonic with shock. Others are keening, that high-pitched wailing grief that transcends language. A few are already thinking practically. Where's the nearest settlement that will take refugees? How far to water? Can we make it to Hebron or Jericho before we die of thirst? The Bronze Age world isn't kind to displaced people. Without kinship networks, without property, without even basic tools, these survivors are starting from absolute zero. Here's what we know from archaeology. Something catastrophic definitely happened. The sites identified as potential candidates for Sodom and Gomorrah show evidence of sudden, violent destruction, consistent with extreme heat and seismic activity. Tall El Hammam, the most promising candidate, has a destruction layer that includes melted pottery, vitrified mud brick, and human remains showing signs of thermal trauma. The heat required to produce these effects exceeds anything you'd get from a normal fire. We're talking temperatures of 2,000 degrees Celsius or higher. Some researchers have proposed an airburst event, like Tunguska, where a meteor exploded in the atmosphere. Others point to earthquake-triggered explosions of underground gas deposits. Still others see divine intervention working through natural processes. What's undeniable is the aftermath. The Jordan Valley, this population center that rivaled anything in Egypt or Mesopotamia, was essentially abandoned. The great trade routes shifted. The balance of power in Canaan changed completely. Cities that were peripheral, Jericho, Hebron, Jerusalem, became more important simply because the Kikar cities were gone. It's one of those moments where geology and history intersect, where the physical world shapes human civilization in ways that echo for millennia. You're watching all this from your ridge, and you're starting to understand why this story persisted, why it got written down, copied, preserved, told and retold for thousands of years. It's not just about divine punishment for sin, though that's certainly part of the biblical narrative. It's about what happens when a society breaks its fundamental covenants, when hospitality becomes predation, when justice becomes exploitation, when the social bonds that make civilization possible dissolve into pure self-interest. Sodom didn't fall because of any single sin. It fell because the entire system had become corrupted, because cruelty had become normal, because people had forgotten that civilization requires cooperation, trust, and mutual care to function. The survivors on this ridge will scatter. Some will make it to nearby cities and be absorbed into new communities. Others will die in the wilderness, unable to adapt to life as refugees. A few, like Lot and his daughters, will end up in caves in the hills, their bloodline continuing, but their city-dwelling days over forever. The story says Lot's daughters, believing they were the last people on earth, got their father drunk and slept with him to preserve the family line. It's a troubling story, possibly a later addition, meant to explain the origins of Israel's neighboring nations,
the Moabites and Ammonites. But it also reflects the desperation of survivors, the way catastrophic trauma breaks normal social boundaries and leaves people capable of things they'd never consider in stable times. The smoke continues to rise from the plain as the day progresses, a black column visible for miles in every direction. Other communities will see it: travelers, nomads, people in Jericho and Hebron and the hill country. They'll send scouts to investigate, and those scouts will return with stories of total destruction, of cities erased, of the land itself transformed into a poisoned waste. The stories will spread, mutate, grow. Within a generation, people will be saying, God himself rained fire from heaven. Within a century, Sodom and Gomorrah will be proverbial, their names synonymous with wickedness and divine judgment. Within a millennium, the exact location of the cities will be debated, with various ruins claimed as the authentic site. And 3,600 years from now, archaeologists will still be arguing about it. Was it Tall El Hammam? Bab Edhra? Some other site not yet excavated? Was the destruction earthquake or meteor or something else entirely? Did it happen in 1650 BCE or 2350 BCE or some other date? The debates will continue because the physical evidence, while substantial, isn't definitive enough to close the case. And maybe that's appropriate. Maybe some catastrophes are meant to remain partially mysterious, partially mythic, their details less important than their meaning.
You spot Lot and his daughters farther up the ridge, sitting together in stunned silence. His wife isn't with them, and you remember the warning, don't look back. Did she literally transform into a pillar of salt? Or did she stop, unable to move forward, unable to process the magnitude of loss, and the toxic fumes or collapsing debris claimed her? The biblical text preserves the story in mythic language, but the reality might be simpler and sadder. Sometimes people can't run fast enough from their past. Sometimes grief kills as surely as fire. Lot's face is empty, hollowed out. He's lost his wife, his home, his entire life's work. His sons-in-law, the ones who refused to leave, who thought he was joking about divine judgment, are presumably dead in the ruins below. He made the right choice, listened to the angels, saved himself and his daughters. But right choices don't always feel right when you're sitting on a hillside watching everything you knew burn. The daughters are clinging to each other, and you realize they're probably teenagers, maybe younger. Their entire world just ended. Every friend they had, every familiar street, every market vendor they knew by name, all gone. They'll carry this trauma for the rest of their lives. This memory of the night the earth opened up and swallowed their childhood. As the sun climbs higher, the full extent of the geological devastation becomes clearer. It's not just the cities that were destroyed. The entire plain has been transformed. The earthquakes created fissures and sinkholes across the landscape. The released gases have poisoned the soil. The fires have consumed every tree, every field, every patch of vegetation. What was the most fertile land in Canaan yesterday is now a toxic wasteland. Even if people wanted to rebuild, they couldn't. The land itself has been rendered uninhabitable, at least for generations. Historians still argue about whether this was purely geological, an unfortunate convergence of earthquake, gas release, and ignition, or whether there was something more, some element of intentional judgment that transcends natural explanation. You take one last look at the smoking ruins below, then turn away.
You've survived a day in Sodom and Gomorrah, witnessed the death of a civilization, seen what happens when a society forgets why compassion and justice matter. The lesson isn't subtle. It's not meant to be. This is a cautionary tale written in ash and melted brick, a warning carved into the geological record. Societies that abandon their covenant obligations, that turn hospitality into exploitation and justice into cruelty don't just decline slowly, they can end catastrophically, leaving nothing behind but ruins and stories. The wind shifts, blowing smoke away from the ridge, and the air becomes briefly clearer. You can breathe without coughing. Around you, survivors are starting to move, beginning the long walk toward whatever comes next. Some are heading north toward Damascus, others west toward the coastal cities, still others south toward Egypt. They're scattering like seeds after a fire, and eventually they'll tell their stories, plant their memories in new soil, and the legend of Sodom and Gomorrah will grow. You could follow them. You could become part of that diaspora, one more voice adding to the story. But your time here is ending. You can feel it. That sensation of the present becoming past, of your observer status in this timeline reaching its conclusion. The smoke rising from the plain is starting to fade, not because the fires are dying, but because you're fading, returning to your own time with the images burned into your memory as permanently as the destruction layer archaeologists will excavate 3,600 years from now. Your last sight of the Jordan Valley is from this ridge at mid-morning, the sun bright and merciless, the ruins of 5 cities sending up their memorial smoke. It's the kind of devastation that changes geography, that creates a wound in the landscape that never quite heals. The Dead Sea will expand slightly, its chemical-laden waters creeping into the plain. The soil will remain contaminated for generations. And the stories will outlive the physical evidence, will be told around campfires and copied onto scrolls and debated in academic journals, a testament to the day the earth itself seemed to judge the wickedness of humanity and find it wanting. You survived, most didn't, and that, ultimately, is the point of the warning. Don't become Sodom. Don't let your society slide into cruelty disguised as commerce, exploitation dressed up as order. Don't forget that hospitality isn't weakness, and compassion isn't foolishness. Because the alternative, the smoking ruins, the scattered survivors, the 6th century gap in the archaeological record, is a price too high to pay for the temporary advantages of treating people as prey. The smoke is thinning now, carried away by winds you can't feel anymore, and the ridge beneath your feet is becoming less solid, more like memory than stone. You're leaving this place, this moment, these ruins that haven't been ruins long enough yet to be called ancient. The survivors around you are fading too, becoming shadows, becoming stories, becoming the ancestors of people who will tell their grandchildren about the day the cities burned. Take a deep breath, clean air now, your own air, not thick with sulfur and ash. Let the tension drain from your shoulders, from your chest, from the tight muscles in your legs that were ready to run at any moment. You're safe. You were always safe, really, an observer in someone else's catastrophe. But the fear was real enough while it lasted. That's the thing about visiting history's darkest moments. The emotions don't care that you're just passing through. The terror is genuine, even when the danger isn't. Think about Sodom now from a distance, from the safety of time and space. That thriving city at dawn, bustling and corrupt and utterly confident in its permanence. The marketplace where every transaction was a small violence. The hospitality customs inverted into weapons. The crowd at Lot's door, ready to violate every sacred covenant for the pleasure of dominance. And then the shaking, the fire, the smoke rising like a prayer that went nowhere, but up and up into empty sky. All that life, all that accumulated human effort, reduced to rubble and memory in the space of a single night. But don't let the horror be the only thing you carry away. Remember too that some people made it out. Lot and his daughters, whatever their flaws, survived because they listened when angels spoke. The few who quietly left during the night,
taking the omens seriously even when their neighbours mocked them. The survivors on the ridge who will walk down into new lives, carrying trauma but also carrying the story, preserving the warning for everyone who comes after. Catastrophes end, but humanity continues, adapting, rebuilding, hopefully learning.
Close your eyes if they're not closed already. Feel the solid reality of wherever you are right now, your bed, your couch, your quiet corner of the world that isn't burning. The Jordan Valley is peaceful these days, if you ever visit. Green in spring, golden in summer, no trace of fire except in the archaeological layers beneath your feet. Sodom and Gomorrah are gone, but the lesson isn't. Societies need more than wealth and power to survive. They need justice. They need compassion. They need people willing to protect strangers and share bread and salt. And remember that civilization is a covenant we all maintain together, or it collapses into ash. The wind is gentle now, carrying nothing heavier than evening cool. And the stories of Bronze Age catastrophes are settling into the shelf in your mind where history lives. Tomorrow you'll wake up, and this will be just another tale you know. Another warning from the ancient world. But tonight, right now, in this moment between waking and sleep, you can still feel the heat of those fires, still smell the sulfur, still see the smoke rising and rising like a question that every society has to answer eventually. What will you do when the earth itself seems to be judging your choices? Rest now. Let the darkness be comfortable instead of threatening. Let silence be peaceful instead of ominous. You've walked through ruins, witnessed judgment, survived what shouldn't be survived. The ancient world has lessons enough for one night. Tomorrow brings its own challenges, its own choices between cruelty and compassion, between exploitation and justice. But that's tomorrow. Tonight, just let go. Breathe deep and drift into dreams of other times, other places, other stories still waiting to be told. Sweet dreams, everyone. And remember, maybe be a little kinder tomorrow, just in case anyone's keeping score.